I welcome all of you as we're going to begin the book of Haggai today. Haggai chapter 1 has 15 verses, and it's getting their priorities straight. All right, God is rebuking the returning remnant for their misplaced priorities. Would you read verse 1, which is actually an introduction?
Yes. Haggai chapter 1 verse 1. In the second year of Darius the king, in the 6th month, in the first day of the month, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet unto Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and Joshua the son of Josadak the high priest, saying.
All right, in the second year of King Darius, the prophecy of Haggai gives us several specific chronological marking points. There's two in this chapter 1, verse 1 and verse 15, and there's three in the second chapter. There's only two chapters, all right? Verse 1, verse 10, and verse 20. Here we learn that the prophecy began in September 520 BC. This makes Haggai the first among the post-exilic minor prophets. Of the 12 minor prophets, the first 9 spoke before Judah was carried away captive, exiled to Babylon. The last 3 minor prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, each spoke to those who returned from the 70-year exile. Gone was the glory of the former kingdom and temple. Gone was the great population. All that was left was the rubble of Jerusalem and the remnant of the people, and the task of restoration. In 538 BC, Cyrus, king of Persia, allowed the exiled Jews to return to Jerusalem after 70 years in captivity. 2 years later, construction on the temple began, led by Zerubbabel. The work stopped after 2 years, which put it at 534 BC. After 14 years of neglect, work on the temple resumed in 520 BC and was finished 4 years later, in 516 BC. Would you read that for us in Ezra chapter 6, verse 15?
Just a moment. Ezra chapter 6 verse 15. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king.
We notice the dates are reckoned by a pagan king because there was at that time no king over Israel. Yet the date was still important to God. This is Spurgeon speaking. There is a set time for each of his messages to come to men, and God would have them give heed to every message as soon as it was delivered to them. If they do not, he keeps count on the days of their delay. The word of the Lord came by Haggai the prophet in the difficult years of the return from exile. God spoke to his people through the prophet Haggai. Haggai is also mentioned twice in the book of Ezra, the priest who oversaw the work of rebuilding the temple. Would you read for us Ezra 5, 1 to 2?
Ezra 5 verses 1 to 2. Then the prophets Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo prophesied unto the Jews that were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel, even unto them. Then rose up Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua the son of Jozadak, and began to build the house of God, which is at Jerusalem. And with them were the prophets of God helping them.
All right, read for us also Ezra 6:14.
Ezra 6, verse 14. And the elders of the Jews builded, and they prospered through the prophesying of Haggai, the prophet, and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they builded and finished it according to the commandment of the God of Israel, and according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia.
The name Haggai, probably an abbreviated form of the phrase Festival of Yahweh. Some speculate he was born on the day of a major feast in Israel. Zerubbabel and Joshua. Haggai introduced us to two leading figures in Jerusalem during these difficult days of rebuilding the temple. Zerubbabel was the governor of Jerusalem and a descendant of the last legitimate ruler of Judah, Jeconiah. Joshua was the high priest. Verse 2 of Haggai 1.
Yes.
Yes, Haggai 1.
Yes, Haggai 1, verse 2. Thus speaketh the Lord of hosts, saying, These people say, the time is not come, the time that the Lord's house should be built.
Haggai gave this first word in September 520 BC. At that time, the exiles had been back in Jerusalem for 18 years, but the work of rebuilding the temple laid idle for the last 14 years. The work started gloriously. Would you read for us Ezra 3:10-11?
Ezra 3, verses 10 to 11. And when the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, they set the priests in their apparel with trumpets, and the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals, to praise the Lord after the ordinance of David, king of Israel. Verse 11. And they sang together by course in praising and giving thanks unto the Lord, because he is good, for his mercy endureth forever toward Israel. And all the people shouted with a great shout when they praised the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid.
Despite this glorious beginning, after 2 years, the work stopped, mired in discouragement, derailed by a lack of focus. And when Haggai prophesied, the foundation to the temple was laid and the altar was rebuilt, but the temple wasn't yet rebuilt. This people says, that's God's people, all right? The citizens of Jerusalem told themselves that it wasn't time to resume work on the temple. There were some good reasons why they might say this and why the work of rebuilding the temple was hard. The land was still desolate after 70 years of neglect. The work was hard. They didn't have a lot of money or manpower. They suffered crop failures and drought. Hostile enemies resisted the work. They remembered easier times in Babylon. The time has not come, the time that the Lord's house should be built. The people made their excuse sound very spiritual. They couldn't speak against the idea of building the temple, so they spoke against its timing. They said it isn't God's timing to rebuild the temple. Because of the great obstacles against the work, God's people began to rationalize and decided that it wasn't time to rebuild after all. If it's so hard, evidently God doesn't want us to do it, at least no time soon. They may have said the time has not come because they thought that 70 years of captivity that was mentioned in Jeremiah 25 and Jeremiah 29 had not yet been fulfilled. According to Ussher's chronology of these events, they were in the 69th year since the last siege of Jerusalem. Even in this, the people of God lacked faith. There were 3 waves of captivity in 605 BC, 597 BC, and 587 BC. In Daniel's prayer in Daniel 9, he was bold enough to ask God to take the earliest starting point to determine the 70 years, and God did. Unbelief made these returned captives think that God's mercy might not come to Israel until 18 years later. This people, we never like to hear God speak to his people this way, saying this people instead of my people. He said this because he saw their excuses and their poor priorities and noticed that they were not living like his people. We should remember that these weren't bad people. They were the remnant that returned from Babylon. Hundreds of thousands of people went into the Babylonian captivity, and only about 50,000 returned. Those who did were the most committed to the Lord and to the restoration of Jerusalem. Verses 3 and 4.
Verses 3 and 4 of Haggai 1. Then came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, Is it time for you, O ye, to dwell in your ceiled houses, and this house lie in waste?
Then the word of the Lord came. God saw and heard their excuses and saw their poor priorities, and he had something to say to them through Haggai the prophet. Is it time for you to dwell in your sealed houses? The people said it wasn't time to build the temple, but their actions said it was time to live in nicely rebuilt houses. John Trapp, who wrote 200 years ago, said Solomon first built a house for God and then for himself. But they were doing their houses and said it wasn't time to do God's house. And this temple to lie in ruins, this was the real problem. Not that God's people lived in the sealed houses, but they lived in such personal comfort and luxury while the temple was in ruins. The problem was simply wrongly ordered priorities. They were content to let the cause of the Lord suffer at the expense of their comfort. Instead, they should have felt no rest until the work of God was as prosperous as their personal lives and been as willing to sacrifice for work of God as they were for their personal comfort and luxury. It's easy to see how this happened over 14 years. At first, The work is stopped because it's so difficult, and some obstacle in the construction prevented progress. We can't get much done at the temple, and I'm tired of living in a wreck. Time to start remodeling at home. God wants me to give attention to things at home. Home comes first. I would fund more construction at the temple, but all my money is tied up with my home renovation. I'm not living extravagantly. Look at the other houses in my neighborhood. Look at the chariots in their driveway. Someone should get to work on the temple. These are all some of the thoughts they might have had. I hope someone steps up to the job. I've got to finish paneling my own living room. The temple hasn't been open for business for well more than 50 years, and a little while longer won't matter. This isn't the right time. Later will be better. The altar is there, and we can at least sacrifice to the Lord. So we're getting by. The excuses sound familiar, but God saw through them in the days of Haggai, and he sees through similar excuses today. The prophet Haggai was like an alarm clock, unwelcome but necessary. Many Christians are like those ancient Hebrews, somehow convincing themselves that economy in constructing church buildings isn't all important, while at the same time sparing no expense in acquiring their personal luxuries. Houses, it seemed to intimate some of them had more than one house. A city and a country house, while God's house laid waste. They thus lavish out their wealth on private, worldly conveniences, but grudge their charge against God's house. Do you owe so much to yourself and so little to your God? Verses 5 and 6 of chapter 1. Consider your ways and the results of them.
Haggai chapter 1 verses 5 and 6. Now therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. You have sown much and bring in little. You eat, but ye have not enough. You drink, but you are not filled with drink. You clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that earneth wages to put it into a bag with holes.
Consider your ways. The Hebrew figure of speech for this phrase is literally, put your heart on your roads. Haggai asked God's people to consider what their direction that their life was headed, and if they really wanted to continue that way. You have sown much, but you bring in little. The cause of their financial difficulties was their wrong priorities. They suffered setback after setback because the blessing of God wasn't on their pocketbook. Haggai describes a double curse. Instead of much, little was reaped, and the little that was brought home melted away without doing any good. That's what that earns wages to put it in a bag with holes. I do not know of any passage in the Bible that better describes the feverish yet ineffective activity of our own age. These judgments were a fulfillment of promises God made hundreds of years before in the time of Moses. Would you please read for us Deuteronomy chapter 11, 16 and 17.
Deuteronomy 11 verses 16 and 17. Take heed to yourselves, that your heart be not deceived, and ye turn aside and serve other gods and worship them. And then the Lord's wrath be kindled against you, and he shut up the heaven, that there be no rain, and that the land yield not her fruit, unless you perish quickly from off the good land which the Lord giveth you.
The people of Israel were being judged, and they didn't even know it. They probably wrote it off as bad luck or tough economic times, but God was trying to tell them something. Sometimes our priorities are out of order and we seem to suffer no financial hardship. In such times, we should never presume on the mercy of God. We should turn to him, reorder our priorities before he needs to use crisis to get through to us. You drink, but you are not filled with drink. If our priorities are wrong, nothing will satisfy us. Each accomplishment soon reveals that there must be something more, something that can really satisfy. Nothing fills the God-shaped void in our life except putting him first. Had your little been as the righteous man's little, you might have lived on it and rejoiced in it. But it had not such a blessing upon it. It was blasted, and so was weak, empty, and profited little. Verse 7 to 11.
Verse 7 to 11 of Haggai 1. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Go up to the mountain and bring wood and build the house, and I will take pleasure in it, and I will be glorified, saith the Lord. You look for much, and lo, it came to little. And when you brought it home, I did blow upon it. Why? Saith the Lord of hosts. Because of my house that is waste, and you run every man unto his own house. Therefore the heaven over you is stayed from dew, and the earth is stayed from her fruit. Verse 11, and I called for a drought upon the land, and upon the mountains, and upon the corn, and upon the new wine, and upon the oil, and upon that which the ground bringeth forth, and upon men, and upon cattle, and upon all the labor of the hands.
Go up to the mountains and bring wood. God called them to work. Sometimes God's cause needs work, work that is supported by prayer, not work that is neglected because of pretended spiritual service. It was work to be embraced by individuals without thinking. Someone else will do it. When David Livingstone applied to a missionary society in Scotland because he wanted to bring Jesus to Africa, they told him, young man, when God sees fit to evangelize Africa, he'll do it without your help. This is not the case at all. God will do it, and he wants and often will wait for our participation, that I may take pleasure in it and be glorified. This was time for God's people to start being concerned with pleasing him instead of themselves. In their nice houses and prosperous lives, they took pleasure and were glorified. Now it was the Lord's turn. God was telling them to do it with the right kind of heart, a heart that wanted to please and glorify God. You looked for much, but indeed it came to little. When God was neglected, nothing worked right. They were able to accomplish some things like building their own houses, but it didn't bring the satisfaction it should have. I called before I called for a drought on the land. We can imagine the people of God depressed and discouraged because of the drought. They thought it was all an attack of Satan. They prayed fervently against what they said was Satan's plot. Yet, it wasn't Satan's doing at all. It was the Lord who called for a drought on the land. The problem wasn't Satan, but their priorities. On the grain, the new wine, and the oil. Because they neglected the Lord, he neglected to bless their three basic crops. The response to Haggai's prophecy, verse 12.
Verse 12. Then Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel and Joshua the son of Jehozadak the high priest, with all the remnant of the people, obeyed the voice of the Lord their God, and the words of Haggai the prophet, as the Lord their God had sent him, and the people did fear before the Lord.
Then Zerubbabel and Joshua, with all the remnant of the people, obeyed. Obedience had to begin with the leadership. This wasn't just a sermon for the people, it also was for the highest leaders among God's people. The voice of the Lord their God and the words of Haggai the prophet. The voice of God was expressed through the words of Haggai. This is the principle of the inspiration of the scriptures in action. God literally speaks, but it's through a man's words. For the word of the God is not distinguished from the words of the prophet, as though the prophet had added anything of his own. That's what Calvin said. In pointing out both, Haggai is distinguishing between the author of the truth and the messenger of the truth. The words of Haggai the prophet, as the Lord their God had sent him, their respect for Haggai was based on his office of prophet and his commission that the God had sent him. The people feared the presence of the Lord. Their fear of God prompted obedience. This was more than basic respect. It was recognition that God is a judge who deals with us righteously. Verses 13 to 15.
Verses 13 to 15. Then spake Haggai the Lord's messenger in the Lord's message unto the people, saying, I am with you, saith the Lord. And the Lord stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and the spirit of Joshua the son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and the spirit of all the remnant of the people. And they came and did work in the house of the Lord of hosts their God. In the 24th day of the 6th month, in the 2nd year of Darius the king.
I am with you, says the Lord. God was there to encourage them and to strengthen them for the work. He always empowers and encourages us to do what he commands. So the Lord stirred up the spirit. Would to God for such a stirring of the spirit among his people today. The stirring began with the leadership, Zerubbabel and Joshua, and then it extended to the people, all the remnant of the people. They came and worked on the house of the Lord. The stirring of the Spirit didn't come and go just as a spiritual experience. The stirring of the Spirit flourished into a stirring of the work. We're going to go to chapter 2 of Haggai, the coming glory of the temple. Would you read verses 1 to 3? This second chapter of Haggai is the glory of the second temple. This is the second word from God where he describes the glory of the new temple. Verses 1 to 3.
Haggai chapter 2, verses 1 to 3. In the 7th month, in the 21st day of the month, came the word of the Lord by the prophet Haggai, saying, Speak now to Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua the son of Jozadak the high priest, and to the residue of the people, saying, Who is left among you that saw this house in her first glory? And how do you see it now? Is it not in your eyes in comparison of it as nothing?
In the 7th month, this message came in October of 520 BC. It was feast time in Israel, celebrating both the Day of Atonement and the Feast of Tabernacles. Who is left among you who saw this temple in its former glory? Haggai spoke some 66 years after the temple was destroyed. Certainly, there were some old men who had seen Solomon's temple in its splendor. Ezra 3:12 to 13 described those who had seen the first temple. Felt like 16 years before this. This Ezra 3:12 to 13 describes what those who had seen that first temple felt like 16 years before this prophecy of Haggai, when the work of rebuilding the temple first began. Would you read that for us? Ezra 3:12 to 13.
Ezra chapter 3, verses 12 to 13. But many of the priests and Levites and chief of the fathers, who were ancient men, that had seen the first house, when the foundation of this house was laid before their eyes, wept with a loud voice, and many shouted aloud for joy, so that the people could not discern the noise of the shout of joy from the noise of the weeping of the people. For the people shouted with a loud shout, and the noise was heard afar off.
The men in Ezra 3 wept because they saw the temple in its former glory. When he built the first temple, he spared no expense in materials and hired the best talent he could find to do the work. The temple that was to be rebuilt couldn't match the majesty of that first temple. In comparison with it, is this not in your eyes as nothing? These kind of comparisons between the good old days and the present day, or between the work of God in various places and times, are rarely beneficial. It didn't do the people of Haggai's day any good to think of how magnificent Solomon's temple was compared to their own rebuilding work. Spurgeon said, "The smallness of our gifts may be a temptation to us. We are consciously so weak and so insignificant compared with the great God and his great cause that we are discouraged and think it vain to attempt anything. The enemy contrasts our work with that of others and with that of those that have gone before us. We are doing so little as compared with other people. Therefore, let us give up. We cannot build like Solomon. Therefore, let us not build at all. Yet, brethren, there is a falsehood in all this. For in truth, nothing is worthy of God. The great works of others, even the amazing productions of Solomon, all fell short of his glory. A.W. Tozer, he was a great man of God, suggests this prayer regarding our tendency to compare and compete. Dear Lord, I refuse henceforth to compete with any of thy servants. They have congregations larger than mine, so be it. I rejoice in their success. They have greater gifts, very well. That is not in their power nor in mine. I am humbly grateful for their greater gifts and my smaller ones. I only pray that I may use to thy glory such modest gifts as I possess. I will not compare myself with any, nor try to build up my self-esteem by noting where I may excel one or another in thy holy work. I herewith make a blanket disavowal of all intrinsic worth. I am but an unprofitable servant. I gladly go to the foot of the cross and own myself the least of thy people. If I err in my self-judgment and actually underestimate myself, I do not want to know it. I purpose to pray for others and to rejoice in their prosperity as if it were my own. And indeed, it is my own if it is thine own, for what is thine is mine. And while one plants, another waters. It's you and you alone that gives the increase. Verses 4-5.
Verses 4-5. Yet now be strong, O Zerubbabel, says the Lord, and be strong, O Joshua, son of Josadak, the high priest, and be strong, all ye people of the land, saith the Lord, and work, for I am with you, saith the Lord of hosts. According to the word that I covenanted with you when you came out of Egypt, so my spirit remaineth among you. Fear ye not.
God gave the leaders and the people of Israel 3 clear commands: be strong and work and do not fear. Each of these 3 were essential to getting the work of God done. Great things are not accomplished without action. I am with you. The same God that did great things in the past was among them today, so they could be encouraged. Undoubtedly, fear gripped many of the returnees, fear that God had written an eternal Ichabod over Jerusalem. My spirit remains among you under the old covenant. The Holy Spirit was among the people. Under the new covenant, he would be in God's people. Chapter 2, verses 6-9.
Chapter 2, verses 6-9. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, yet once it is a little while, and I will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and the dry land. And I will shake all nations, and the desire of all nations shall come. And I will fill this house with glory, saith the Lord of hosts. The silver is mine, the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts. The glory of this latter house shall be greater than of the former, saith the Lord of hosts. And in this place will I give peace, saith the Lord of hosts.
This is the only portion of Haggai quoted in the New Testament. Would you read for us Hebrews 12:26?
Hebrews 12, verse 26. Whose voice then shook the earth, but now he hath promised, saying, Yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven.
It announces God's intention to shake the present order in his coming day of judgment. Then shall come the desire of all nations. Through the centuries, most see this as a prophecy of the Messiah coming to his temple, rebuilt in the days of Haggai and Ezra. This understanding began with the ancient rabbis and continued among Christians and fits well with the promise of filling the temple with glory. Some point out that this word for desire can also be translated treasures. We know that the Gentiles will bring tribute to the Lord in the millennium. Isaiah 60, verse 5.
Isaiah 60, verse 5. Then thou shalt see and flow together, and thy heart shall fear and be enlarged, because the abundance of the sea shall be converted unto thee. The forces of the Gentiles shall come unto thee.
But that won't bring treasure to this temple that was rebuilt in the days of Ezra and Haggai. The true desire of all nations is Jesus. This is Spurgeon. Even if the nations themselves do not know it, he is the one, the true reformer, the true rectifier of all wrong. And in this respect, the desire of all nations. Oh, if the world could gather up all her right desire, if she could condense in one cry all her wild wishes, if all true lovers of mankind could condense their theories and extract the true vine of wisdom from them, it would just come to this: we want an incarnate God, and you have got the incarnate God. Oh, nations, but you know it not. Ye in the dark are groping after him and know not he is there. Knowing, again, Spurgeon says, knowing that Jesus is the desire of all nations also encourages our missionary work. Brethren, I may add, Christ is certainly the desire of all nations in this respect, that we desire him for all nations. Oh, that the world were encompassed in his gospel. Would God, the sacred fire, would run along the ground, that the little handful of corn on the top of the mountains would soon make its fruit to shake like Lebanon. Oh, when will it come? When will it come that all nations shall know him? Let's pray for it. Let's labor for it. This is what Spurgeon says. As we've mentioned many times before, prophecies have their initial fulfillment, but they also have their far-reaching fulfillment. And this, the desire of all nations, is definitely referring down to the millennial reign of Jesus Christ. The silver is mine and the gold is mine, saith the Lord of hosts. They didn't need to be discouraged if they didn't have money for the building project. They had to boldly trust the God who owned every resource and then gives generously. When we really trust God, we will give generously. Hudson Taylor, the groundbreaking missionary to the interior regions of China in the second half of the 19th century, experienced this principle early in his life. As a young man, he preached in boarding houses in the poor slums of London. A poor man asked Taylor to come back to his room and pray for his wife, who suffered complications from childbirth and was near death. The man had no money at all, and he couldn't afford to pay a priest to come and perform last rites. Taylor went to the man's room and found the heartbreaking situation: several children, the afflicted mother, a 3-day-old baby living in absolute filth and squalor with absolutely no food or money. Taylor knew he had a $20 coin in his pocket that would meet their needs, but it was all the money he had in the world himself. He began to speak to the family about God when the Lord spoke to his own heart and said, "You hypocrite, telling these unconverted people about a kind and loving Father in heaven and not prepared yourself to trust him without your $20. Taylor, this is Hudson Taylor, wished that he had 2 10 pieces. He would gladly have given them one, but all he had was a $20 coin. He was taken aback, but decided to lead the family in the Lord's Prayer. As soon as he said the words, "Our Father," the Lord convicted him of his hypocrisy again. He struggled through the prayer under tremendous conviction and then gave the father the $20 piece. That provision saved the life of the mother and rescued the family. The lesson is plain. God provides. Knowing that God provides should make us more generous instead of less generous. I don't have to give to their need because God will provide for them some other way. The glory of this latter temple shall be greater than the former. The glory of the temple was, in fact, greater. Herod remodeled this second temple into something greater than Solomon's temple. The Lord of glory, Jesus, personally visited it and worshiped there, because Christ shall appear and preach in it, who is the brightness of his Father's glory. That's what Trapp said. All right, when it says the glory of this latter temple is greater than the first. In this place I will give peace. The promised peace is shalom, which is far more than stopping conflict. It is the establishment of a lasting, righteous good. The third word from God, clean and unclean, verses 10 to 14. This is a question for the priests.
Verses 10 to 14. In the 24th day of the 9th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, ask now the priest concerning the Lord, saying, if one bear holy flesh in the skirt of his garment, and with his skirt do not touch bread, with his skirt do touch bread or pottage or wine or oil or any meat, shall it be holy? And the priest answered and said, No. Then said Haggai, If one that is unclean by a dead body touch any of these, shall it be unclean? And the priest answered and said, it shall be unclean. Verse 14, then answered Haggai and said, so is this people, and so is this nation before me, saith the Lord. And so is every work of their hands, and that which they offer there is unclean.
Haggai questioned the priests, who were accustomed to answering such questions about the transmission of both holiness and impurity. The priests answered correctly according to the law of Moses. Holiness is not contagious, but impurity is. I like this. Listen carefully. A sick child cannot catch health from contacting a healthy child, but the healthy child can become sick by contacting a sick child. The principle of transmission really only works one way far more than both ways. In other words, that which is bad can be communicated and transmitted and transferred. That which is good can only be given by God. So is this people, and so is this nation before me, on the same principle, living in the Holy Land. Offering sacrifices would not make the people acceptable as long as they themselves were unclean through neglect of the house of the Lord. Since their exile to Babylon, the people of Israel focused on getting back to the promised land. In and of itself, this was not a bad focus. Yet it led to the thinking that once they made it back to the promised land, everything else would be good. Haggai reminded them that their presence in the promised land doesn't make everything they do holy. If the priorities of our heart are wrong, nothing we do is really holy to God. Verses 15 to 19.
Verses 15 to 19. And now I pray you, consider from this day and upward, and before a stone was laid upon a stone in the temple of the Lord, since those days were, when one came to an heap of 20 measures, there were but 10. When one came to the pressfat to draw out 50 vessels out of the press, there were but 20. I smote you with blasting and with mildew, and with hail in all the labors of your hands. Yet ye turn not to me, saith the Lord. Consider now this day and upward, from the 4th and 20th day of the 9th month, even from the day that the foundation of the Lord's temple was laid. Consider it. Verse 19. Is the seed yet in the barn? Yea, as yet the vine, and the fig tree, and the pomegranate, and the olive tree hath not brought forth. From this day will I bless you.
I struck you with blight and mildew. Those experiences of God's chastening were real, but God's people did not learn from them. Difficult times don't necessarily bring us to God, but from this day I will bless you. God promised blessing to his people if they put their priorities back in order with him and his work first. Nevertheless, the blessings might not come immediately, and he did not want them to become discouraged, but to trust that from this day I will bless you. From the day that they listened to the preaching and began to do what they were told by God to do. God says, I'm going to begin to start blessing you. All right, 20 to 22.
Verses 20 to 22. And again the word of the Lord came unto Haggai in the 4th and 20th day of the month, saying, Speak to Zerubbabel, the governor of Judah, saying, I will shake the heavens and the earth, and I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms, and I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the heathen, and I will overthrow the chariots and those that ride in them, and the horses and their riders shall come down, every one by the sword of his brother.
Yeah, I want you to notice in what our sister just read to me. I will shake heaven and earth. I will overthrow. In other words, this is going to be the work of God, not the work of man. All right. It was easy for the returning exiles to feel insignificant in the world, as if they were just pawns or spectators. God wanted them to know that though they were small in the eyes of the superpowers of the world, they were servants of the God of all power. They are on the winning side. I will shake heaven and earth. I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms. I will overthrow chariots and those who ride in them. This word of encouragement shows us that Haggai's messages from God were a mixture of rebuke and encouragement. God promised to fight for his people in his day of restoration and rescue. Verse 23.
Verse 23. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, will I take thee, O Zerubbabel, my servant, the son of Shealtiel, saith the Lord, and will make thee as a signet, for I have chosen thee, saith the Lord of hosts.
All right. I will take you, Zerubbabel. The signet ring was a token of royal authority, much like a throne, a crown, or a scepter. This is not a personal assurance only to Zerubbabel, for neither he nor his natural seed reigned in Jerusalem or rose to any special eminence in the kingdoms of the world. For I have chosen you. Zerubbabel was truly chosen of God. In the ancestry of Jesus, Zerubbabel was the last person to stand to be in both the line of Mary, the blood lineage of Jesus, and Joseph, the legal lineage of Jesus through Joseph. All right, I want you to read Luke 3:27. This is the blood line. This is Mary, all right?
Luke 3, verse 27. Which was the son of Joanna, which was the son of Rhesa, which was the son of Zerubbabel, which was the son of Salathiel, which was the son of Neri.
All right, Matthew 1:12.
Matthew chapter 1, verse 12. And after they were brought to Babylon, Jehonas begat Salathiel, and Salathiel begat Zerubbabel.
Yeah, so we can see that in both of the lines, all right, the bloodline of Jesus through Mary and the legal lineage through Joseph, Zerubbabel's name was there, all right. God used these two lines of ancestry for Jesus because he placed a curse on the seed of Jeconiah, also known as Coniah or Jehoiachin, as recorded in Jeremiah 22:30. That line was royal line of David. So if Messiah was to qualify for the throne of David, he had to be of the legal line of David, yet not of his seed. Jeconiah was the last legitimate king of Judah, and the royal house of David goes through him. His only successor was Zedekiah, his uncle, who was appointed not by right, but by an occupying Babylonian ruler. Even at the end of his life, the Babylonians recognized Jeconiah as the legitimate king of Judah. Because Zerubbabel was a descendant of the last legitimate king of Judah, he could be legitimately recognized as the ruler, though not king, of the returning exiles. That is the end of Haggai.